Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Aisha, your host. It's that time where you ask and we answer rapid fire style with Dr. Shabir Ali. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shabir.
Pleasure to be on.
Okay, so it's rapid fire. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Question number one is what the viewer is asking about so-called satanic verses. So if you can shed some light on that.
What this refers to is there is an Islamic tradition that says that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was reciting the Quran to the public, and then Satan came and inserted something in what he is reciting. How that happened is a bit of a mystery, but nonetheless, later on, the angel Gabriel came to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and said, what did you recite? I didn't give you that. And so that part had to be repealed, and that's no longer part of the Quranic recitation. And what did that piece of recitation say? It basically gave some credence to the idols that the pagans worshipped, or some of the gods of their conception. They thought that God has daughters, and these daughters would be intercessors with God on our behalf. So naturally, this is totally contrary to the Islamic theology, and these could not be accepted as part of the Quranic narrative. However, modern scholars looking at this, myself and many others, we find it incredible that this could be a part of the narrative at all, that this could have been a fact of history, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, recited these so-called verses, which are thought to be of devilish or satanic origin, and hence the satanic verses. Why? Because if we look at the broad picture, we see that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the rest of the Quran, before and after this, is diligently speaking against the other gods and declaring that there is only one God, only one true God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, Allah, and that none of these other gods, idols, or concepts that people have could be of any avail to anyone. So it would be quite odd if on one occasion he just slips up and gives a narrative which gives credence to their God. So I wouldn't take that to be an authentic narrative.
Okay, perfect. The next viewer is asking, can you recommend a reading on the Quran? The translations I've been reading don't make much sense. The viewer is asking for some tafsir or a more comprehensive guide that talks about the verses in their context.
A translation that is quite modern and quite easy to understand and easy to follow is the one by Mustafa Khattab entitled The Clear Quran. One that has more commentary and is quite good is the one by Muhammad Asad entitled The Message of the Quran.
Perfect. I'll look at that one as well. I looked at Mustafa Khattab's. Okay, next one is, can you address the issue of privacy in Islam? Is it allowed to spy on people? If yes, to what extent? And then if not, then what about spying companies? Are they halal or haram?
There's not an easy question for us to answer, but let me start with the Quran, which says, وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا in the 49th chapter, which means do not spy on each other. Well, or do not spy, just don't spy. Well, spying has been looked down upon in the Islamic tradition because of this verse of the Quran, and there are other narratives as well. So in the justice system of Islam, it is known that the judge can't go spying on people and use the evidence from the spying against that individual. He has to deal with the evidence that is presented in the court of law. So it is mentioned in the narrative, for example, that Omar, who was the caliph at the time, he heard a person reciting some things and he realized that the person was drinking. He scaled the wall and he found the person indeed drinking. But this person held him responsible, like, you're violating the Islamic principles. Why did you scale my wall? So Omar had to leave the matter alone, and he was rightly chastened. So we know from all of this that spying is not allowed. Now, in our modern times, we have the technology to, in a non-intrusive way, to gather information that could help all of us, could lead to safety. So to the extent to which we use this information and ensure the safety of the populace on the whole, this is a continuing discussion between two opposing camps, one insisting on the privacy of individuals and the other looking at the greater problem of public safety. Well, they're both great problems, and the balancing of these two alternatives between, on the one hand, ensuring the privacy of individuals, and on the other hand, ensuring the safety of individuals and the public at large. These will have to be continuing discussions, both in Muslim and non-Muslim societies, to see to what extent we can use information gathered by stealth means for the purpose of the greater good. But if, of course, one is using the information to the detriment of the individuals and to the society, well then this is not permissible in Islamic law.
Obviously there's still a lot of discussion even online about privacy issues, so rightly so that it's a complicated topic. Next one is, I saw a video which talked about the story of Dhul Qarnayn in the Quran that was copied from the story of Alexander the Great. Could you please explain?
There are many studies showing that the Quranic narratives are not related in the Quran for the first time. The Quran is basically using stories that are known to the first audience of the Quran, but relating them in a way that is conducive towards bringing out the Quran's own theology and moral teachings. So to find that, okay, this story in the Quran is similar to a story that existed before, that's not a problem. That's already a given. The Quran is saying what is, when it so happened, remember this, wadhkur, mention this, or bring to mind this incident. So the Quran is talking about things which people already know, but it is narrating the stories, or not so much narrating the stories, but alluding to them, drawing attention to bits and pieces of the stories in order to bring the whole story to mind, but especially particular incidents within the larger stories in order to teach people a certain moral teaching or theological principle.
Perfect. The next question, the viewer is asking, are you allowed to hold hands, kiss or hug your spouse in the outside? I'm referring to this on what the Quran says about it, not the hadith, because I know what tradition thinkings are about. So I guess the viewer is asking, publicly can you do that? Traditionally, I guess it hasn't been allowed.
The rules concerning this can vary from one society to another depending on the sensitivity of the people, what they hold to be like a high moral standard within their society. So you can have something that is a clear Islamic rule, and you can have something that is really like within a certain family. In a certain family, we have a certain rule for our family. And within a larger context, a clan or even a country, they can have their rules based on what they consider to be their moral standard. But the basic minimum is what would be mentioned in the Quran or in a clear statement of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I'm not aware of anything that clearly says in the Quran that, you know, a husband and wife cannot get close to each other, you know, in public. But obviously, there's a certain extent to which if they get close to each other, that would be indecent. You know, an example of an indecent exposure will be, you know, the couple that were shown in the midst of this situation in, I think it was in New Orleans or something like this. There was a flooding or massive chaos, and then there was one photograph that went viral of a couple on the floor with the female largely exposed. Obviously, you know, this is what people will pick up because some minds, you know, go for this kind of low level of thinking, and this is what stimulates people. But if, you know, in a situation, you know, people are saying goodbye to each other at the airport, for example, one is traveling, one is left behind, and there is some hugging, even a peck on the cheek or something like this, you know, that to me is not indecent. But again, societies can decide for themselves what are the levels that could not be crossed.
What does the Quran say about abortion?
The Quran does not say anything about what we know to be abortion in our modern times specifically, but the Quran speaks against killing your children. And the commentaries on this say that people were, at the time of the Quranic revelation, that means people from the time of ignorance who did not yet get the Quranic message, were even burying their children alive, mostly girls, because you know, a girl will be born and now they're thinking this girl will be a burden to the family. We should have rather gotten a boy, because a boy will grow up to be a breadwinner in that society at the time, and perhaps be a warrior, defender of the tribe and so on, but a girl seems to be a liability. Apparently some people buried their girl babies. for this reason. So the Quran spoke against this, saying, do not kill your children out of fear of poverty or even out of poverty. The two different statements in the Quran about this. So based on that, we know that you cannot kill your children. Now, what about the child in the womb? Is this already a child? Does this qualify as a person? The Quran says we cannot take a soul, and taking one soul is like taking, the whole humanity. Well, is this a soul yet? So Muslim scholars thought about this, and there's a narrative that says that so much time passes and then the angels breathe the soul into the womb of the mother. So some thought that if it is done before this time, then it should be basically permissible. And in our modern times, we think even that seems questionable because life is really there from conception. But yet, the classical rulings are there, allowing for the abortion to take place before the soul is breathed into the body. Now, when is the soul actually breathed into the womb? The most obvious way in which narrative goes about this in the Hadith would give us 4 months. So because it says 40 days for this, and then 40 days for that, and then another 40 days, and then the soul is breathed. So 3 periods of 40 days together make 4 months. But some others, especially in modern times, are looking at the reality of the development of the embryo, think that it's better to interpret this to see the 3 periods of 40 days as overlapping. And so it is 40 days altogether. After which the soul is breathed in. So if the abortion is done before 40 days, then this seems more acceptable. Not acceptable by all, but more acceptable, or more people will say that it's acceptable than if it is done after the soul has been breathed in. So but there is a certain degree of flexibility in this, and allowance for different opinions of a scholarly nature. Not that everyone should follow their own whim and fancy, but scholarly opinion differs about this. So we can then see that on the one hand, there are some people outside of Islam who prohibit abortions altogether, thinking that from the very inception this is inviolable. And then there are the others who, on the other extreme, say that the woman has the right, this is her own body, she can do with it whatever she wants, even killing this developing embryo. And now Islam takes a middle stance between these two extremes and says that, okay, there is an allowance for abortion up to a certain time, but after that we're dealing here with a real viable human being, though still within the womb of the mother and dependent on the mother, and now you cannot kill this baby because that's really a viable human being that you're dealing with here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.
Hey YouTube, we hope you benefited from this video. If you liked it, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more, check out some of our other videos. And don't forget to subscribe so you can get new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.